Life in the urban sprawl as a police officer doesn't just toughen you, it armors you with a shell of skepticism so thick it might as well be Kevlar. That was me, Emma, a 37-year-old former lieutenant turned private detective, dragging around a suitcase of mistrust heavier than any case I'd ever cracked. My daily grind revolved around uncovering infidelity and exposing deception, hardly the backdrop for a romantic fairy tale. Then Bobby walked into my life, a beacon of modern art in a world of muted grays. He brightened my reality like a vivid brushstroke on a weathered canvas. We met at an art exhibition in Philadelphia, a space teeming with enthusiasts tossing around words like postmodern and avant-garde as if they were common vernacular. Feeling out of place, I wandered the gallery like a fish trying to pedal a bicycle. Intriguing piece, isn't it? Bobby's voice cut through my unease. He was staring at what could only be described as an intentionally chaotic pile of junk. If by intriguing you mean I've seen tidier garbage heaps, then sure, I quipped. His laugh was deep, warm, and inviting, drawing a few curious glances from the crowd. He introduced himself, and from that moment, my life took on a new hue. Fast forward 7 months, and I was utterly captivated. Bobby, with his dapper style and old-world charm, swept me off my feet. Poetry readings, art shows, and moments under the stars made me feel like the only woman alive. Under the canopy of Central Park, he proposed, and I said yes without hesitation, my heart racing with joy. But every fairy tale has its shadows. Enter Marilyn, Bobby's mother, the epitome of frostiness. Our first dinner together was a masterclass in tension, her scrutinizing gaze making me feel like an unwelcome intruder. A detective? Isn't that a bit unladylike? She asked, her tone sharp. Depends on what century your expectations are anchored in, I replied smoothly, earning a tense smile from Bobby. Marilyn's visits soon became unwelcome audits of my life. 3 weeks into our marriage, she appeared unannounced. Emma, darling, she began, her voice dripping with condescension. Still clinging to that quaint little job of yours? I had hoped marriage would refine you. Slicing vegetables for dinner, I gripped the knife tighter. Marilyn, where I come from, we call this earning a living. Maybe you should try it sometime. My tone was steady, but the jab landed. Her lips pursed. Bobby was raised with certain expectations. There's still time for you to find a more suitable career. Like being a full-time meddler? Thanks, but I'll stick to tracking down cheaters and liars. Speaking of which, how's your bridge club treating you? I shot back. Bobby walked in then, his timing impeccable as always. What's going on? He asked, glancing between us. Your wife was clarifying her career choices for me, Marilyn replied sweetly. Bobby sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. Mom, Emma's career is important to her. It's part of who she is. Turning to me, he pleaded, Emma, let's not do this now, please. I wanted to argue, to defend myself, but I held back. Fine, I said curtly, returning to the vegetables. After Marilyn's visits, Bobby would retreat into silence. It became painfully clear whose side he was on, and it wasn't mine. One evening, after Marilyn criticized everything from my cooking to my housekeeping, I confronted him. Why don't you ever stand up for me? Your mother treats me like I'm invisible, and you just let her. Is this what our marriage is supposed to be? He looked weary. Emma, she's old-fashioned. What do you want me to do? Cut her off? No, I replied, exasperated. I want you to support me, to tell her she can't bulldoze over us. Is that too much to ask? I'll talk to her, okay? Just give it time. She'll adjust, he said, raking his fingers through his hair. But she didn't adjust. Neither did he. The gap between us widened, fueled by Marilyn's coldness and Bobby's passivity. Living with him felt like starring in a melodrama. the cracks in our once perfect facade growing deeper. Bobby's job at a prestigious art gallery sounded impressive, but his earnings were inconsistent. Meanwhile, I was left questioning whether I had signed up for a love story or a cautionary tale. I worked hard to provide us with a comfortable life in a stylish apartment in a desirable neighborhood. One evening over dinner, I decided to broach the future. "I've been thinking," I started, setting my fork down. "Eventually, it'd be nice to buy a house. You know, something with enough space if we decide to start a family." Bobby paused, his fork midair, looking at me like, that night, after suggesting buying a house, Bobby stared at me like I'd just proposed moving to Mars. "Emma, where are you getting these ideas? We don't need a house, and me finding a new job, that's not even on my radar." I took a steadying breath, keeping my voice calm. "It's not about needing it, Bobby. It's about planning, stability, thinking ahead." He chuckled, a sound that used to warm me but now grated on my nerves. "You and your obsession with money, always crunching numbers. Money isn't everything, Emma." That laugh, that dismissive laugh, pushed me to the edge. "Easy for you to say when you're not the one stressing about the bills every month," I snapped, my voice tight. He shrugged, still eating, as if my words were as insignificant as background noise. "I contribute in other ways, Emma. Not everything is about money." Placing my fork down with deliberate care, I stared at him. "Maybe I wouldn't focus so much on money if you contributed more than just critiques about how I handle it." Without looking up, he muttered, "You're never satisfied, are you?" That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, my thoughts racing. It wasn't just about the house, the kids, or the finances. It was about respect, partnership, and support, none of which Bobby seemed to value. As long as his life was comfortable, my concerns were nothing more than an annoyance. The tension between us came to a head on an ordinary Sunday when Marilyn, my ever-charming mother-in-law, made one of her infamous unannounced visits. In the living room, she paced, phone pressed to her ear, her voice teetering between panic and indignation. "You're telling me my social security number has been suspended? How much do I need to pay to fix this?" From the kitchen, mug in hand, I froze at the words social security and asterisk payment. Asterisk years of police work had sharpened my instincts, and every fiber of my being screamed asterisk scam. Asterisk setting down my coffee, I walked briskly into the living room. "Marilyn, hang up. It's a scam," I said, keeping my tone calm but firm. She turned, eyes wide with disbelief. "I beg your pardon? I'm handling this, Emma. There's no need for your intrusion." Her pride and stubbornness radiated, but I pressed on. "Marilyn, trust me. I've dealt with hundreds of these cases. They're trying to steal your money." Her lips tightened as though she wanted to dismiss me, but doubt flickered in her eyes. "This is serious. I don't need your opinions." Stepping closer, I softened my voice. "Hang up, and we'll call the real Social Security office together. You'll see." Reluctantly, she ended the call, her hand trembling as she clutched her phone. Just as I thought there might be a moment of understanding, Bobby stepped into the room, his expression torn. "Mom, you should have listened to Emma from the start," he said, placing a hand on her shoulder. But Marilyn's glare turned icy, her pride unyielding. "Convenient for her to play the hero, isn't it?" The gratitude I'd hoped for evaporated, replaced by a searing tension. I clenched my jaw, swallowing the retort bubbling up. Later, when the frostiness lingered, I called her. After 3 rings, she answered, her tone sharp. "What do you want, Emma?" I cleared my throat. "I wanted to check on you. Did you call the bank about the scam?" A long pause hung between us before she replied. Her voice clipped. "Yes, they confirmed it was a scam." Relief washed over me, but her tone hardened. That doesn't excuse your behavior. You were rude, aggressive, even pinching the bridge of my nose. I sighed, the weight of the day pressing down. I'm sorry if I came across as harsh. I just didn't want you to get hurt. Her response was curt. Next time, try showing some respect. Whether or not you meant well, your tone was completely unacceptable. The line went dead, leaving me staring at the phone, wondering if there would ever be a time when I wasn't walking a tightrope between Marilyn's disdain and Bobby's passivity. I tried to protect her. Marilyn, these scammers are professionals. They're convincing, and they thrive on hesitation, I said, my tone calm but firm. Her response was curt, though grudgingly tinged with acknowledgement. Well, I suppose I should thank you for stopping me from making a mistake, but don't think this changes my opinion of your methods or your demeanor. Goodbye, Emma. After the call ended, I saw an opportunity to mend the growing rift between Bobby and me, his upcoming birthday. I envisioned a romantic weekend getaway, a chance to rekindle the spark we'd lost. Carefully, I planned every detail, determined to make it special. But fate, or Marilyn, had other plans. She bulldozed my efforts with her own, scheduling a grand dinner at her mansion on a weekday, knowing full well about my packed work schedule. Over the phone, I pleaded, "Can't we move it to Saturday? I'm drowning at work." Her voice was a saccharine mix of sweetness and control. "No, dear, this is when it's happening. Bobby shouldn't have to adjust his birthday to fit around your job." Frustration gnawed at me, but I couldn't sway her. Confiding in my boss, a man who had seen more than his fair share of betrayals, brought unexpected understanding. "Go," he urged with a knowing look. "Do what you need to do." When I arrived at Marilyn's, the party was already in full swing, a spectacle of wealth and pretense. Marilyn's smile tightened as she whispered something to Bobby, her eyes darting toward me. My gaze followed hers to the fireplace, where Bobby sat with his arm draped casually around a woman I instantly knew was more than just a colleague. Heart sinking, I steeled myself and approached. "Aren't you going to introduce me?" I asked, forcing a composed tone over the whirlwind of emotions inside me. Bobby flinched, his eyes widening in surprise. "Aw, Emma, this is Lori from the gallery," he mumbled awkwardly, then turned to her. "And this is Emma, a relative." The word hit me like a slap. A relative? Seriously, Bobby? I shot back, incredulous. "Your wife, remember?" My voice cut through the room, silencing the hum of conversation. Bobby's face flushed red with embarrassment and irritation. "You know, a real wife would have made her husband's birthday a priority," he snapped, turning away dismissively. Before I could respond, Marilyn appeared, her disdain dripping with venom. "You see, Emma, you just don't fit in here. Bobby needs someone supportive. Like Lori, not whatever this is." She gestured toward the door, her smile sharp as a dagger. "I think it's best if you leave. You're not wanted here." Summoning every ounce of dignity, I stood tall. "You know what, Marilyn? Maybe you're right. Maybe I don't belong in a family that thrives on lies and deception." Without another word, I turned and walked out into the cold night, the chill wrapping around me like the aftermath of betrayal. #### a new chapter. After the disaster at Bobby's birthday, I knew I needed irrefutable proof to end our marriage on my terms. Investigating Bobby myself felt unbearable. I could handle uncovering strangers' secrets, but not my husband's. So, I called Alan, a trusted colleague with a knack for uncovering discreet affairs. "Hey, Alan, I need a favor," I said, steadying my voice. "Anything for you." "What's up?" "It's Bobby," I admitted bitterly. "I'm sure he's seeing someone. I need evidence." Alan's response was swift and reassuring. "Say no more. I'll handle it discreetly." You'll have everything you need soon. True to his word, Alan delivered. Photos, audio clips, and undeniable proof Lori wasn't just a colleague. She was in the country illegally, seeking a quick marriage to fix her immigration status while engaging in fraud. Confronting Bobby was tempting, but I remembered his condescension, his smug dismissals. He didn't deserve my concern or my help. Filing for divorce felt like tearing off a band-aid from a wound that had festered for far too long. I demanded financial compensation, the bare minimum after his betrayal. The fallout was explosive. Marilyn, ever the dragon, stood by Bobby, painting me as the villain, but I stood my ground, fueled by both the evidence and the injustice of their accusations. When the ink on the divorce papers dried, it wasn't just the end of a marriage, it was the beginning of a new chapter. Opening my detective agency wasn't just a dream fulfilled. It was a testament to my resilience. One morning, as sunlight streamed into my new office, illuminating my desk, I smiled. From the ashes of betrayal, I had rebuilt my life, and it was brighter than ever. The framed license on the wall caught the sunlight, casting a warm glow over my office. Alice, my right-hand woman and confidant, peeked her head in with a grin. "Boss lady, you've got a minute? We've got a potentially big case. A woman suspects her husband of cheating. She's asking for surveillance photos. The works." I couldn't help but smile at the irony. Sounds like our bread and butter. Do we have the details? Alice stepped inside and placed a file on my desk. Yeah, but there's a catch. She's on a tight budget. I paused, thinking back to the moments in my life when I felt helpless, desperate for answers. Tell her we'll work with her budget. And Alice, let's make sure we're thorough. I know all too well what it's like to be on the other side of this conversation. Alice nodded, her grin widening. Knew you'd say that. You're a good person, you know. I smirked. Try telling that to my ex. Days passed, and the cases piled up. Each investigation felt like another piece of my broken self was being put back together. Infidelity, secrets, lies, these were the patterns I'd become accustomed to uncovering. Yet with each case I closed, I found validation that starting over had been the right choice. One morning, as the city stirred awake, an elderly woman burst into the office, her distress palpable. She argued with my receptionist, demanding to speak to the agency owner. Curious, I stepped out to meet her and froze. Standing in my office, looking equally stunned, was Marilyn, my former mother-in-law. Recognition flickered in her eyes before embarrassment set in. "Emma, you run this agency?" "I do," I said, keeping my voice steady despite the swirl of emotions. "How can I help?" Desperation overshadowed her shame. "You have to help me find her, the woman who ran off with my son's money. Bobby's in shambles. Do it for the family's sake, without charge." Her audacity rendered me momentarily speechless. I took a steadying breath before replying. "Marilyn, first, we're not family. Second, I run a business, not a charity for ex-in-laws. Emma, after everything, can't you do this one thing? It's the least you could do," she pressed, her tone growing sharper. I laughed bitterly. "The least I could do? Marilyn, after your son cheated on me, after you humiliated me at every turn, you expect me to just forgive and forget? Go to the police, they're better equipped for this." She stared at me, flabbergasted, as if the thought of me refusing her had never crossed her mind. "Marilyn," I added, my voice firm, "I've learned my lesson, never trust scammers and liars. Maybe it's time you did, too." Without waiting for a reply, I turned and walked away, leaving her standing there, defeated. A week later, my phone buzzed. The caller ID showed a number I thought I'd erased long ago. Against my better judgment, I answered. "Bobby, what do you want?" "Emma," he began, his tone hesitant. I've been thinking. I want us to start over. For the kids, you know? I snorted. Really? And where would we live in this fantasy of yours? With your mom? At first, he said eagerly, we could save money. Then you could buy us a house. It'll be perfect. The absurdity of his proposal struck me. I laughed, more out of disbelief than amusement. You think I'd come back to play house with you and your mom, and then foot the bill for a big house? Emma, I've changed. Please. No, Bobby, I said firmly, my voice steady. You haven't changed a bit. Goodbye. As I hung up, a profound sense of peace washed over me. The call, absurd as it was, served as validation. I had grown, I had healed, and I had reclaimed my life. Turning back to my work, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. After all, the best revenge isn't anger, it's living well, and I was doing just that.